As anticipation for the Texans Chargers on Saturday continues, one thing becomes more and more apparent. It's been apparent for a while. One of these teams comes from a really good division. The Chargers are in a division with the Chiefs, looking to three-peat, first team in NFL history to do so. One of the best teams of our lifetime. We also have the Broncos, who are heading in the right direction. Sean Payton has them going, and the Raiders, not great. Although they might be able to compete in the AFC South, which is where the Texans are right now. And it is continuing to be the biggest dumpster fire of a division in all of football. And really, it's been that way for a while, really since Andrew Luck retired, really since Bill O'Brien was winning back-to-back division titles and Andrew Luck was getting roughed up. The Texans were beneficiaries of being in a dumpster fire division, but it might be as bad as it's ever been. Now, how should that make Texans fans feel? We'll talk about that in a second. We're going to talk about the state of the other three teams as well as the breaking news. It is the Locker Room, number one source for Texans digital content. I'm Landry Locker. Texans practice today, practice a little bit later, closer to 2. I'll be on the scene. Myself, Cody Stutes, which is the other half of SNL, another YouTube channel. Subscribe on all podcast platforms. We'll be on the scene. We got you covered. But let's just talk about the dumpster fire that is the AFC South. The Titans, they have fired their GM. Rand Carthon is gone. Adam Schefter had it first. He's out as Titans general manager. Carthon spent 2 years in Tennessee with 2 different head coaches and still has 4 years remaining on his contract. A new Titans GM will be making the number 1 overall pick. Now, this is really interesting because you go back to when the Titans decided to fire Mike Vrabel, which was surprising to many. And Mike Vrabel, it was very, very clear that Mike Vrabel was not pleased with the direction of the organization. We remember the viral video when they traded A.J. Brown, which is kind of seems to be the point in which things fell apart. But Mike Vrabel was unhappy. And this is what Amy Adams Strunk, whatever you want to call her. This is what she had to say when she made that decision and why that decision was made.
Can you tell us the reason or reasons that you decided to make this change?
The last 2 seasons have been very disappointing. And the fans felt it. I felt it. We made changes last year, and I came to believe we needed to make a change to the coaching staff.
People want to know when.
Not sure that really explains a lot, but she was also asked about a message for Titans fans. Keep in mind, this wasn't too long ago, but Amy Adams, and this is from the Tennessee website, if you can't tell. Amy Adams had a message for Titans fans then, and here is what she had to say about the state of the organization.
Adams Strunk want Titans fans to know at this time.
I have high expectations, and I'll never apologize for that. And these fans deserve a great team.
Okay.
And they deserve a championship brought to the city. And that's what we're going to work towards. And I'm prepared to make the hard decisions to hopefully get us there sooner.
Okay. Well, not too long after that, they've fired their general manager. And the Titans right now, I think it's really time between the obsession over the Oilers stuff and all that. It's really time to talk about Amy Adams the same way. Amy Adams Stank, the same way that you talk about Woody Johnson, the same way that you talk about Jerry Jones, although he's a Hall of Famer. She's an absolute disaster. She ran off a coach who overachieved. Titans were the 1 seed. They went to the AFC Championship. And she basically let a general manager go over his head, and then she brought in another one, and she sided with him, and shortly after that, she got rid of him. This is a dysfunctional organization, and the state of the Titans is very simple right now. You're trying to hire a general manager. You're keeping the coach, so there's already an uphill battle there. You don't have a quarterback. You whiffed on Will Levis, although that was worth the tire kick in the second round, and now you have the number 1 overall pick. If you're a Texans fan, if you're a Jags fan, if you're a Colts fan, you should hope that the next general manager is forced to take a quarterback with that top pick in a draft that doesn't appear to have good quarterbacks. Now, it's an inexact science, but I don't think that anyone would be shaking in their boots if the Titans did that. But the bottom line is this. Right now, it's time to look at Titans ownership, Amy Adams Stank, and think, okay, she might be the worst owner in the NFL. there might not be a close second. She might be the worst owner in the NFL. So there's 1/4 of the AFC South. Then you have the Jaguars and the decision that they made in the offseason. The Jaguars fired Doug Peterson. NFL.com had this report first. Doug Peterson was an interesting hire. I don't think Doug Peterson was a bad hire. And quite frankly, the state of the Jags might be deeper than Doug Peterson. The reality is the Jags had that number 1 overall pick. We thought Trevor Lawrence was going to be a generational quarterback. He's an okay quarterback. He's not generational. You're paying him like he's one of the elite quarterbacks, and he's not one of the elite quarterbacks. So you have to keep churning until you find the right coach. Now, the other problem is the Jags are keeping Trent Baalke. And before the Doug Peterson decision was made, Trent Baalke, every Jags fan that came across my timeline had a picture of Trent Baalke with a clown nose on it. And the Jags decided they were going to let him make that number 1 overall pick. Now, what did he do with that number 1 overall pick? He took Travon Walker instead of Aiden Hutchinson. You can make a case that had they had Aiden Hutchinson last season, they win the division and they don't melt down instead of the Texans winning the division. Now, how different does that look? Who knows? Obviously, Hutchinson got hurt with the Lions. Would he have got hurt with the Jags? Who knows? But Trent Baalke being around is really, really interesting. But it might not even be the most interesting thing in the division when it comes to a general manager. Now, the Jags, they can be a decent team. They could be a good team with Trevor Lawrence. But I don't think anyone thinks that they're going to be some sort of elite perennial contender. There can be a year-to-year stretch where the Jags win the division. But right now, their ceiling, their long-term ceiling is kind of capped based on what you think Trevor Lawrence is. And I think we lean more towards him potentially being good and not great, not groundbreaking. Now you look at the Indianapolis Colts, and let's just look at the guy that's making the decision in Indianapolis. Jim Irsay has been the decision maker for the Colts for a while. This was with Bussin' with the Boys. My friend Kevin Bowen out there. This was Jim Irsay going to address the Colts their final game of the season. He's not in great shape. Jim Irsay is not in good shape. And Jim Irsay has always been kind of a loose cannon. He's always been kind of a wild card. But that is what Jim Irsay is looking like right now. And what did Jim Irsay decide to do? You saw Pat McAfee's tweet after the Colts. He basically called out the whole organization. He called out the culture, everything. Pat McAfee basically wrote an essay and called out the Colts. Now, what is Jim Irsay doing? They fired their defensive coordinator. They fired Gus Bradley. They're bringing back their coach. They're bringing back Chris Ballard. They're staying as is. So you have a team that fired their general manager in Tennessee with the worst owner in the league. You have a team in Jacksonville that fired their head coach. They have a good quarterback. They don't have a great quarterback. They're trying to figure stuff out. And then you have the Colts who are basically staying the way that they are, and they don't have a quarterback either. And they're talking about Anthony Richardson competing. You're still holding off hope that Anthony Richardson can be a starting quarterback in the league? That might be another issue all in itself. The AFC South has always been kind of a disaster. It is a complete disaster now. And I think it's also kind of interesting that the Texans, when they were at their best, they were kind of chasing Peyton Manning. You didn't have 3 dumpster fires around you. You were chasing Peyton Manning, and you were chasing that elite. So this is not a great thing. And I don't necessarily think the Texans should be doing victory laps, because when Cal McNair made the change from Bill O'Brien and the Texans went with the rebuild, he said he wanted to go from good to great. And I myself, many people mock the Texans for hanging their hats on AFC South titles, division titles. So right now, that's all the Texans are. They are the best team in the AFC. Now you have a young quarterback, you have a young coach, you have a young core of players, but this is not something to do victory laps about, because the Texans' goals should be much bigger. It should start Saturday with a team that looks like they're heading in the right direction, and they're doing so despite not being in a crappy division. Let's look at the Chargers instead of laughing at the AFC South. It is a dumpster fire. It is amusing to see what Amy Adams Stank, good old Shad Khan, Jim Irsay, and the Colts got going on. The AFC South is a disaster, but the Texans should have bigger goals. SNL Live after practice today with myself and Cody Stutes. Subscribe to that channel. Subscribe on all podcast platforms. And always remember, when it comes to this Texan stuff, We're all in it together. Appreciate y'all for coming through. We're all in it together. Let's eat.